Air Force Academy graduate, delivering programs to NASA, to Disney. You're a best-selling author. You're a contributing writer for Forbes. This is not a typical path for a kid who is born to teenage, impoverished parents. Why was your path different?
Oh my gosh, we're starting off right out of the gate with a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, man, we're we're
Yeah.
we're cutting to the core right
This has
away.
definitely not been a traditional path, to say the least. Growing up the way that I did, it made me hungry to want to do something more. My parents were teenagers in poverty when they had me. Growing up, things in my family that we had, broken homes, unemployment, drug and alcohol addiction, suicides, incarcerations, you name it, we had it in my family.
Hmm.
And so growing up that way and looking around at the world, I grew up seeing things through a lens of saying, well, I don't know all the things that I want to do with my life, but I know that there's got to be more out there. And it got me on a path of pushing myself hard in school, pushing myself hard in athletics. I think really where it started changing is starting to read biographies, believe it or not, when I was
Hmm.
11. First one I read was Chief Joseph. Second one was Teddy Roosevelt. I've been reading them ever since because I'm constantly, I'm still fascinated by what makes people tick. Why we hold somebody in high esteem, how they got there. And when you read these people's stories, whoever it is that you admire and, want to emulate in your own life, you realize these people had a journey of pain, challenge,
Hmm.
falling on their face, doubting themselves, the process. And yet somehow, some way they kept taking one foot in front of the other and got to be where we, hold them in this, high level of esteem. That always fascinated me. So that was the path, that kind of got me fully engaged in school, led me to get an appointment to the Air Force Academy, which was my number one pick for the 8 colleges I applied to. So that was a blessing. And one of the things I wanted to do was become a fighter pilot. That was my goal. I was a licensed pilot all through high school.
What planted that seed?
My dad ruined my life at 13. He took me for an orientation flight in a small Cessna for my birthday. And
Wow.
of course, tongue in cheek, it like changed everything. But they created a monster because as soon as I landed, I could not get that out of my head, and I begged for over a month. Please let me take flying lessons. Please, I'll do anything. And finally they relented and they said, look, if you want to do this, you got to keep all your grades, A's and B's. You have to stay out of trouble, and you have to make all your own money to do it. And they thought
Hmm.
that third one was going to be the deal breaker. And I said,
Sure,
nope,
of course.
deal. Let's do it. And man, I scooped up dog doo doo, mowed yards, babysat, whatever I could do to make money, and started flying when I was 13. So soloed when I was 16, pilot's license at 17. I knew how to fly an airplane very well before I ever learned how to drive a car, which is
Wow.
scary. It's like I had to be
That's
dropped
nuts.
off at the
You could
airport
do that. You
by my
you could
mom.
fly. You could, yeah. You somebody drives
Because
you
I
to the
didn't have a
airport because you can't
license.
drive, but you could go
Yeah,
fly a plane.
only in America,
That's
right? Yeah,
nuts.
it's nuts. But it changed my life. It made me hungry. It got me really engaged in school. I had a purpose. I had a focus. I get to the Air Force Academy, second week of basic training. They said you were never going to fly anything but a desk. Your eyes are terrible. How
Hmm.
did you even make it in the office? Kind of thing. And it was devastating. It was devastating. I sat out in the stairwell for 2 hours and cried my eyes out. I had a shaved head, and I do not look good bald. I look like a squirrel monkey. And I sat out there miserable, and I said, well, what do I do now? My dream is over. I prepared for this for 4 years of my life. I mean, I put a lot of,
Yeah.
blood, sweat, and tears into this process. People were out partying on the weekends. I'm flying. I'm reading books to pass tests and stay current and active with.
Yeah. This is what you're made for.
That's it. That was my whole goal. And so when that changed, it was devastating. I started realizing, well, I started doing a quick assessment. I said, well, you know, I'm here at a great institution. I'm on a fully funded, federally funded scholarship to graduate. I'm already making really good friends. The harder you work with other people beside you, the tighter those bonds get and the quicker they form.
Sure.
And I said, and besides, I'm bald right now and I look horrible and I don't want to go home looking like this. So I'll at least wait until the hair grows out. 4 years later, I'm throwing my hat up. The Thunderbirds are screaming over and we're graduating. Um, I stayed back at the academy, recruited for a year, and would go out and spread the good word about the Air Force Academy, the path to officership in the Air Force. And I found that I loved it. I never knew that this was a path I would do professionally, but that's where the seed was planted. And I would go out and tell these stories, share milestones and what it was like to go to combat survival school and jump out of an airplane and go through the Air Force Academy and the rigors that required. And I found that I loved it. So I stayed with speaking on the side, got into my career field in space warfare in the Air Force, got my master's degree at University of Southern Cal, but I kept speaking on the side, not knowing what I would ever do with it. All I knew is I loved it. And I loved being able to help people and inspire people and share my stories, hopefully in a way that triggers them to do more in their own path. And I had an opportunity to start doing it full time when I went back to the academy and became chief of the Minority Enrollment Office, which is the Office of Diversity now. But I ran the office that I worked for, and it put me back out on the circuit again. And that's when I made a decision. I said, this is what I feel I was meant to do. And so I got out of the military, started doing this full time. And, it's been a crazy, wild journey of ups and downs, but I wouldn't change it for the world. And it's a blessing to do this type of work at this level. And yeah, it's been amazing, but totally unexpected, and glad I found my path when I did.
Yeah. So I want to unpack your story a little bit because you shared a lot there. What made you could have gone either way whenever growing up, impoverished teenage parents, and you said there's alcoholism and suicide and all these negative influences all around you. Like you could have gone either way. Like, and a lot of people go the wrong way.
And
why was there a mentor? Or was there a moment where you witnessed something, or like what put you on a path that maybe wouldn't be the default for, I think, a lot of people?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is what always fascinates me about reading other people's biographies too. What was it? There was a couple things. One is I had great mentorship. My parents had incredible work ethics, both of them. They came from a background that they really struggled, especially early on in our family's journey, and made a lot of worked their rear ends off, made a lot of sacrifices. I paid attention to that. My mom became a career nurse, went back to school later in life. My dad was career military. I saw what it was to be in service to others and how tough that was, but how fulfilling and important it was. I had some great teachers along the way that I will never forget that shaped me into who I became today. And I'm very grateful for all of them. And most of them drove me absolutely nuts. But those are the ones that you remember, the ones that kick your rear end.
Any ones in particular that you remember? Any words, any specific moments that you can remember that a teacher might have poured into you?
Miss Carana. I got to see her for the last time last summer. I went back to where I grew up in Biloxi, Mississippi, got to see her in person. It was beautiful. She's passed away a few months after that, but it was just to be able to see her one more time and to thank her in person for the influence she had. She was my sophomore English teacher, and I thought her job was to make me miserable. She and I went round and round that whole year, and she was very tough. She made me rewrite papers and do things over, and just never gave me a break. And all these years later, when my first book came out, I wanted to thank the people that helped me get there. And of course, her name pops up into the list. And you think at 15, those people were there to drive you nuts. And as an adult, you realize they had been the best gift. They got you to see things in yourself that you didn't know were there. Things that, by the way, that have had a tremendous effect on the way that I contribute to the world, the way that I take care of, my family, myself. It's, one of those things that you look back with gratitude, but she's one of, a handful of teachers that really made an indelible mark on my life in a very positive, meaningful way. Forever grateful for those folks.
So I want to relate this directly for the listener, because the listener is, probably an adult, 30s, 40s, 50s, male, professional. And you're like, okay, what does this have to do with me? Well, think about where you're at. Like I have so many clients who we work with in our coaching program that know there's more, know there's better, know there's something else, know that they have more in them. And what they're doing now is, well, maybe it's okay. They know there's something more. And for you, the listener, like look around, like there's a way out for you too. And for I know DJ mentioned education, and you might be thinking, well, I already got my college degree. Well, no, like what is the education that you need now?
That's
Is
it.
it a course that you have to sign up for? Is it a coach that you have to hire? Is it a program that you have to commit to? Or are you just going to stay the course now, because the problem is what got you here won't get you there?
Right. Right. It's two things, Jim. I mean, that's a great point. It's education and environment. And yeah,
Mm.
education goes way
Yep.
beyond the degrees we earned, no matter how good the school was. Education is everywhere you can gather it. It's in books, it's in videos, it's in our own personal journey, it's in conversations we have with other people. Mentorship is critical to our success. When we're able to be around people who not only think, give us a vision of what better could look like, but expect us to get there. Having that accountability with, the friends that I have, my inner circle is very tight and it's by design.
Mm.
I know a lot of people. I know you do too. But who I surround myself with, I know matters. I had an elder tell me this years ago. He said our spirits are like sponges, they soak up whatever they're around. So we're
Yeah.
responsible for becoming our own environmental engineer. So who I hang around with are people that are smarter than me, sharper than me, that are competitive in a good way, in a positive way. We compete with each other all the time, not at each other's expense, but to lift each other up. And these people are priceless in my life. I mean, this is one of the biggest things, one of the most important elements, I think, in creating a life of success, however you define that, is surrounding yourself with the right people. It truly matters.
My clients who are listening right now are saying, Jim, say it. Jim, tell him. It's we have a component to our coaching program that's called environment of excellence, and a big piece of that is the people. Like, who are the people you're
Yeah.
around? Like, when I trained at the Olympic Training Center, I was around world class athletes, and it just raises your game. Like, you're just a sponge. You're just absorbing. Oh, like even if you're not like consciously aware, which you are obviously consciously aware of a lot of things, like the training and the kind of things that are going on, but even at an unconscious level, you're like, you hear how they're talking, you see what they're eating in the dining hall, you see how they're interacting with their coach, and all of this, it's just filtering into you by osmosis. And
Yes.
you have to craft that, like, at this point in our lives, as a kid, you couldn't really control that. You were in this, environment in these schools where, bad things were happening. But now we get to control this. We get to define this. We get to choose who we spend our time with, choose our inner circle. Like you, I mean, so
I think sometimes too, Jim, it comes
yeah,
down
that's really
to an
important.
insecurity. Like we get to a certain level of, and this can be our curse. We get to a certain level of success, whatever it is that we do, and we don't want to admit that, hey, there's a lot more in the tank, because it's an insecurity thing. We don't want to ask for help or ask somebody, how do you do this even better? Because we get to a certain point where we almost paint ourselves into a corner, and that the ego gets in the way, right? Instead of stripping
Sure.
it down and saying, hey, there's so much more I want to learn. I see what you're doing at your level. How did you get there? Any advice for me? And that's really what it comes down to, is allowing that, to be able to put that aside, and just keep the goal in mind, that the goal is always to become better. No matter how good we've been, no matter how much we've struggled, we can always do better going forward, always, under any circumstance, regardless of resources, and even if it's by inches. But we can't do that when we're our own worst enemy, where we don't reach out and ask for help or say, hey, I don't know all the answers here. What I'm doing is working, but I know it's not the only model, and there's probably something better. But that's where we have to keep the doors of the schoolhouse open for a lifetime. It's just, we can't ever get to a point where you say, I've done enough, I've learned enough, I've got this figured out. That's the moment
Yeah.
we start getting old and getting inflexible.
Yeah, and it's easy to do, especially, you get busy with life and you kind of get into a groove that's actually a rut, but you can't
Yeah.
tell. And you just kind of repeat yesterday, and you do the same thing today for no better reason than that's what you did yesterday. And then you continue on, and you don't really, have you don't really take the time to step back, evaluate, ask the question, say, hey, who do I need to maybe keep at arm's length? Who do I need to, get around more? What's the education I need to commit to, whether it's an online course or a program to sign up for, or join Toastmasters and improve your public speaking,
Yeah.
whatever it is for the listener. Like, you have to actually take action on this stuff. Otherwise, it doesn't happen by default.
You do. I mean, that's every time I look back at incidents that push me up to a different level, it comes back to that dynamic. It really does. And I'm an enrolled member of the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians from Michigan. So growing up, being a tribal member, two of the biggest mentors I had that really inspired me, because I got to see this through a different lens, is what successful looks like in that world. Like Howard Rainier was a late great mentor of mine, phenomenal speaker, super energetic, native. Billy Mills, Olympic gold medalist. He was one of those guys that, again, he gave me an endorsement for my first book. He didn't have to do that, but we connected, and I looked at him as a hero. I mean, that the movie that they made about his life, when I was a kid, I watched that, and then years later, I'm meeting this hero in real life. I always say, be careful, when you meet your heroes. Not with Billy Mills. He fit those shoes and then some.
Wow.
Blew me away. But to be able to see a successful Native man doing this pursuit was also another thing that played connect the dots in my mind. Of if they can do it, maybe there's a chance for me too. But if we're never in that type of environment where we allow ourselves to think differently, act differently, we don't do differently.
Yeah. You talk about the moment at the Air Force Academy where they said the only thing you're going to fly is a desk, and your dream is crushed. Yeah. For the listener out there who maybe they had their dream crushed, 20 years ago, or maybe they had their dream crushed yesterday, right? And maybe it's the huge dream, like the life dream, or maybe it's just, gosh, I thought I was going to sign up that client and I failed. My goodness, I guess I'm just not good at this. What do you say to them? Because you had that moment, and maybe you've had more of those moments. I'd love to hear another one, if you have sort of another one you could relate to us that's maybe more recent, or more sort of when you became a professional out speaking or writing or whatever it might be. Because those moments come, and usually we're not even aware of the fact that we're saying the words, this isn't for me, I'm not good enough. It just kind of, by default, it's this internal voice that says, yeah, lower your goals, settle. That next thing is probably not going to be good for you. You're not going to get there.
Yeah. This is tough because we can catastrophize really quickly. We can get kind of sucked in the swirl of that, that negative mindset. When something like this happens, where something gets derailed, and again, I wish I would have had that skill set when it first happened, because I was miserable, and didn't know what I was going to do. But I'm glad I made the decision I did, to stay. Made all the difference. But now when something happens where things don't go according to plan, things fall apart, whatever it may be, you get to ask yourself questions, like, what story am I telling myself about what I'm going through right now? You get to ask questions like, what's good about this? How can I leverage this into something even better? What can I learn going forward? How could I do this a little bit better? And it's not people get into that criticism mode where we start beating ourselves up for what we didn't do. But I I have the same philosophy: never, ever, ever criticize yourself. You've got the whole world to do that for you. It's important to point out our areas of improvement. But for crying out loud, when things don't go right, and that's half a life, if we're out there doing anything, we got to just be able to say, hey, how can I do this better? And keep moving forward. You learn as you go. There's no mistakes. It's all learning if we look at it through that mindset, and it keeps us going through the next thing. What we don't want to do is, take the wrong lesson out of that moment, which is, maybe this wasn't for me. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I was crazy to even think it in the first place. Mark Twain has a great quote about a cat on a hot stove. He said, a cat on a hot stove will never again get on a hot stove, but they won't ever get on a cold one either. It's like you're taking the wrong lesson out of that moment, where now we don't try anything anymore.
Great quote.
I was like, I'll just completely avoid that. But everything that I've done, I mean, creating the business, writing the books that I wrote, there's just been infinite amounts of challenges, self-doubt, falling down on your face. A time where we did a CD project years ago, audio CDs, and it was my responsibility to review the print on the back of the case. And I was busy. I was in a hurry. I didn't think it really mattered that much until we printed 2,000 copies with the wrong cover. That was a lot of
Oh
money
no.
that went down the drain that I had to
Yeah.
get them reprinted, and they cut me a discount, and it was still a lot. And you look at those moments, and you can get frustrated, but you look at it later, and you're like, well, I learned something there. Attention to detail matters. It always has, but I'm just saying, you get stung like that, and it really makes you remember that. But it's all learning. You learn as you go. We're
Yeah.
all works in progress.
You talked about service earlier in this sort of service mindset. I know that's something that you adopt. I mean, how can the listener really adopt that service mindset when, gosh, they're busy, right? All day long, they're
Yeah.
busting their butt, they're working the 50, 60-hour weeks and busy maybe with the family at home, and they're trying to fit in maybe some time to work out or some alone time. But man, where does service come into this?
Well, service is all those things. It's not just, when we look at service, sometimes people look at it as community service. Some people look at it as military service. Some people look at it as, service you do for your religious groups. It's all that and more. It's the service we provide our clients, that we provide our friends, service that we provide ourselves when we talk about downtime or self-care. But service is that core component of why I think we are here. If we are not put here to serve others, why are we here at all? This is a core component of what I share in my programs, because this goes back to the traditional warrior path in our tribal communities. My tribe, we call a warrior Ogichi Da. And that term has little to nothing to do with what we see on TV and in movies. It's not that sweaty, chiseled figure knocking down buildings with bazookas and knocking down bad guys and, occasional surly looks at the camera, all in the name of glory. We see that a lot with Hollywood big media. But in our tribal communities, that term warrior is very different. It's somebody who's dedicated their lives to developing their creator given talent and ability so they could be an asset to the tribe that they served. It was somebody who was a contributor, somebody who worked a lifetime to do this day in and day out, somebody who put service first, somebody who asked not what could I get, but what could I do for someone else, somebody who at the end of the day was willing to fight for something bigger than their own personal welfare. And I think service is our highest calling. And we have infinite opportunities to do that as long as we're drawing breath, but it's the most fulfilling path we ever take. We get busy being busy, but there is no feeling in the world like being able to serve another human being in a good way. It makes us feel amazing inside. We think serving somebody else well is going to, it's for the accolade or the acknowledgement or the promotion. All those things are great. But at the end of the day, what we tend to forget about when we serve somebody else well is it's not about that at all. It's about the fact that we feel we are in alignment, in that moment, and our spirit shoots through the clouds. But we sometimes forget that because we're so busy. Service is our deepest need. We all have a need to feel valued. We can get some of that fulfilled when we serve somebody else well. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the very first goal that we coach our clients to set is in relationships. Certainly we talk about career, wealth, business, all of that, but it's like this is really about people. Like when you look at what actually makes people happy. I mean, the Harvard Grant study, which has been going on, I think, since 1938, has studied thousands of people, and it's the longest longitudinal study on human happiness ever, and it's still going on. But what they determine, it's about people. It's about connection and people
yes,
and relationships. And that's part of service, is like being in service to others, friends, family, community, neighbors, like that stuff is fulfilling.
it's
It's great to, make a lot of money and be really fit or whatever it might be. But like the stuff that really truly makes you happy is service to others.
Yes, it's the legacy we leave behind us. I mean, this is
Yeah.
this is the
Yeah.
other part that I think gets lost in the way that we look at this. Is I've worked with over 500 tribal nations in the last 25 years of my life, from the Arctic Circle of Alaska down to Florida and from Maine out to Hawaii. And in every one of those
Wow.
tribal communities, when they lose an elder, a key piece of their ongoing history, we have a celebration, a feast. And what gets focused on more than anything else is not the car they drove, the clothes they wore, the cool places they vacationed. What's focused on is that moment that person had a real world impact in somebody else's journey, where they shared insight, wisdom, encouragement, where they were a shoulder to lean on or a hand to hold to somebody who needed it desperately. And that is what gets left behind us after we draw our last breath. And every day of our lives and careers, we're going out and creating another puzzle piece in that image that we're going to leave behind us when we are gone. That is how we get remembered. And we have those moments where when we are mindful, whether it's in the presence of a family member, a client, a friend, somebody that you're doing community or volunteer service with, take those moments as they come and be fully present, when you do that, because that's the only thing that we leave behind is the tail of the tape when we're gone. It matters.
For the listener who wants to go deeper into this, back in episode 420 of this podcast, I talk about legacy, and we talk of just a lot of the stuff that DJ and I were just talking about. So, and no, I don't have every episode number memorized. I actually looked it up as DJ was talking. So, but yeah, back in episode 420, I talk about that. DJ, you have a new book, Warrior. It talks about the warrior spirit. It's called The Warrior Within. What is the warrior spirit? And I mean, you hinted at it a few minutes ago. What is this warrior spirit, and how do you bring this to corporations? So let's just talk about what is the warrior spirit first, because I have a follow-up question I really want to dive into.
Yeah, it's that relentless belief inside, deep down in our core, that says, I will find a way forward. That is unwilling to quit, unwilling to waver, because we know at the end of the day, what we are fighting for is not just for us. When we are fighting for something bigger than us, that's where that warrior spirit really gets engaged. Goes beyond motivation, beyond drive, beyond persistence. When we tap into that warrior spirit, we elevate and are able to do things we didn't think otherwise would be possible. It sustains us, it guides us, it gets us out of the bed in the morning when we don't want to, because we know we're not doing this just for our own benefit. We're doing this to help somebody else out or to have an impact in somebody else's life. That warrior spirit, I unpack it in the book more, and I do it through a lens of what our traditional, in our Native American communities, our tribal communities, what that term meant and how we can follow that pathway, those principles and tenets in our own life. Whether you're Native or not is irrelevant. Good principles are good principles, and they can create an effect for us if we choose to follow them. And that's what that book is all about. It's about resiliency. It's about grit. It's about surrounding yourself with the right people, becoming an elder, which in our tribe, that's like the pinnacle of development, is we become this person who has collected so much in our life through the ups and downs, especially through the downs. That's where we really learn, and being able to share that with our tribe, be able to mentor, other people as they come up to help them as well. But it's about personal excellence for a lifetime, having a vision and sticking to it, self-discipline. There's so much that goes into the book. Each chapter is broken out, but it's all about how do we keep showing up and, creating a better and better version of ourselves in a service environment, because that's traditionally what our warriors were all about. They dealt with fear, they dealt with pain, they had scarce resources, and they were vastly outnumbered, and they still found a way to move forward, to make it work.
Yeah. Do you tap into that? I mean, that story of like you just talked about, the Native American out-resourced, outnumbered.
Yeah, that's throughout the book. That's the common theme throughout the book, is if they can do it under these circumstances, what on earth is our excuse not to be able to channel this in a era where we are surrounded by resources? We have technology at the click of a button. We can talk to somebody on the other side of the planet and get advice. Like, we become our own worst enemy in those moments where we have all these resources and we don't access them. But yeah, I talk about that being outnumbered, overmatched technologically. And so I sprinkle that throughout the book, from that historical perspective. But, like I said, good principles are good principles. And I hope that I wrote the book in a way, and the feedback has come back that way, that it was, being able to see things through a different lens, that it was inspiring, that it was encouraging. But most important, it gave people an idea that there's so much more that they could be working with, from an internal resource point of view, than they realized before they read the book.
If there's one warrior principle that you want the listeners to really take away from today and from this conversation, is there one you could boil it down to and say, if you're just going to take away one today, what might that be?
I think it would be the mental toughness piece. Developing mental toughness. Our warriors did it on purpose and by design. They exposed themselves to the elements, really difficult ceremonies. Even the games that were played to simulate war were really difficult and dangerous.
Like what? Can you give us any examples?
For instance,
Whether it's games or
yeah, some of
ceremonies
the
or sort of
well, the
difficult.
ceremonies like Vision Quest, where you go out, we Hamblecha Yapi to cry for a vision. We go out for 4 days, 4 nights, no food, no water, no shelter, and we simply pray for guidance and direction. And it's extremely difficult. And but what you get out of that experience, there's a trade off.
Have you participated
Yeah,
in something
four
like that?
years. I'm,
Wow.
Sundance is highlighted a little bit in the book too. One of the ceremonies that we do for Thanksgiving, and to give respect for the pain that women go through in childbirth by pushing. We as men pull. We pierce our chests, and we're tied to a tree, and we go up and back 4 times, and on the fourth time we dance backwards until we rip free. And the symbology there
Whoa.
is balance. That women go through that pain, so we as men try to balance it out. But when we finally break from those lines, it's like we start with a clean slate, and we really get to re-engage in our life, let the past be in the past, let go of regret, anger, shame, guilt, whatever it is that's holding us back, and start forward with a clean slate. And that's another ceremony we do for 4 years. Each year we do that. What you get out of those,
At what age?
it depends. Late teens. We had some of our younger dancers were teenagers, and some of our older dancers were in their 60s. So it just, you come to it. I was in my mid-20s when I went through it. It's a life changer, So, but these are ceremonies, and the whole point I was trying to make is, even traditionally, our ceremonies are already always hard and required sacrifice, because the whole idea behind that, especially with warrior training, the games, even exposure to the elements, getting up in the morning and breaking the ice to swim in a river, it was to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, so that when the what hits the fan, they're not freaking out. They're like, okay, I know what this is. I've been here before. I know what this feels like. I know how to respond. And mental toughness is that conditioning that we go through in our own lives, where we can handle the stuff that life throws our way, where we can absorb impact. That's really what it comes down to. Rocky had a great quote about mental toughness. He said, "It's not about how hard you can hit; it's how hard can you get hit and keep moving forward." Which I love that quote.
Right.
We're all going to take
Yeah, me
hits.
too.
How hard can you get hit and keep moving forward? And there's ways that we can develop that on purpose. I talk about it in the book, but it's, things like fostering joy in our life, which we don't do nearly enough of. We're joyful, and we do things that are in the pursuit of that joy, which is deeper than happiness. It forms a barrier between us and the negative, nasty stuff in the world. It's like a crash barrier, if you will. It protects us when we are able to stop outrunning and outworking our feelings. That's another one that is tremendously beneficial, where we're able to sit and process what's actually going on, and ask ourselves, is what I'm telling myself real, or is this just fear showing up? And again, what I said before, what story am I telling myself about what's happening now? We can be great storytellers, and sometimes we're really terrible at it, and we catastrophize, but we get to have that internal dialogue. So there's things that we can do, but the point is, that is one of the best skill sets, I think, in the world today, is being able to deal with that, embracing the fact when things get hard, those are going to be your best learning moments. Instead of running away from it, diminishing it, lean into that stuff. That's where the best things, that's what we were saying before the podcast, is sometimes the hardest, most painful things we ever go through in life bring out the best stuff we never knew we had. And that's a reality. That's, in my life, that has been an absolute truism through all those ups and downs and heartbreaks that I've experienced. I'm in the position now and the person I am now because of those things.
We talked a few minutes ago about being around, like, surrounding yourself with the right people.
Mm-hmm.
I was texting last night with a friend of mine who did his first 100-mile race.
Wow.
And running race. And I said, how did it go? And we were texting back and forth. He said at about the 81-mile mark, he said, I was throwing up and I couldn't keep anything down. No water, no food, no nothing. I said, oh my goodness, what did you do? He said, well, I'd been here before, so I knew how to handle this.
That's it.
And he told me he took a 30-minute nap. He didn't sleep the whole time. So this is like, I don't know, 25 hours into it or something like that. And he's like, I took a 30-minute nap and I woke up with my legs were well rested, whatever that means. Like, well
30
rested
minutes
after a 30-minute nap. after 80
Yeah.
miles in. But the idea is, so two things is like, number one, he had been there before, right? When you go through this kind of adversity, you can handle it again the next time, and other adversities as well. But also, like, this is the kind of person I want to be around. Like, I want to surround myself with people like him. His name's Dan, and I work out with Dan actually a couple times a week. And people think I'm fit. I'm like, no, I'm a bum, because like this guy's the standard, like these are the kind of people you want to
That's
be
it.
around, who are demonstrating these kinds of lessons, DJ, that you're talking about here. And so
Yeah.
it's fascinating for me to get to talk to somebody like you and to listen to these stories. What's an action item that you would recommend for the listeners to take in the next, let's say, 24 to 48 hours, for the listener who's bought in,
Yeah.
loves what you're saying, loves this philosophy? Maybe pick up the book. I certainly recommend the listener buy the book, The Warrior Within. We'll have a link in the action plan. But DJ, can you recommend an action item for the listeners?
Absolutely. I would take a blank sheet of paper and write down 10 moments that you can remember in your life where you showed bravery, where you showed courage. And we tend to overlook this, and it is a travesty that we do so. And the reason why is because we're so busy. We go through something hard and we kind of stumble through it and go, "Oh my gosh, I'm so happy I'm through this. What's on? What's the next thing?" Take a moment, reflect on that, honor it, journal about it, talk about it with friends, spend some time walking and reflecting on what it took for you in that moment to rise to that challenge, where you did something you didn't think you could do, you got through something you didn't think you could get through, but you did. And when you're able to do that, you capture these moments of courage and action, otherwise known as bravery, and you are able to store them away for the future and create what I call a courage reservoir, where you can lean on that stuff. So the next time something gets hard, difficult, or scary, you can look back at this and say, you know what? I've been here before. I've done this. I know what it looks like. I know what it feels like. And then you can base your courage not on faith. Faith is important, but you base your courage on evidence. You remind yourself of who you are, and it gives you a boost of confidence in a moment where you may need it the most. But take those moments, and I think
We often forget that.
you're going to be pleasantly surprised when you're honest with yourself and say, where did I really bring it? Where was it really tough? Where was it hard? What did I learn? And when you find that,
Yeah.
it's exciting.
DJ, where can people find you, follow you, buy your book, etc.?
Best place to get a hold of us is nativediscovery.com. The website has information on what I do, who I work with. There's videos. There's information on my book, The Warrior Within, where you can buy that. You can buy it anywhere books are sold. If you're too busy to read, I'll read the whole darn thing for you. There's an Audible version as well, and I am the narrator. Spent 4 days in a sound recording booth doing it, but happy on how it turned out. But that's the best way to get a hold of us, nativediscovery.com.
Excellent. For the listener, of course, we'll have the links to that in the action plan. Go to jimharshawjr.com/action. DJ, thank you so much for making time to come on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jim. It's been a pleasure.